So today we have Laura Connelly with us, who actually met just on Instagram. She is recently Emmy nominated for Beef, and she's going to give us the pitch. She's going to tell us how she got into film. So, Lauren, why don't you give us your story? How'd you get into this?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel really lucky. I've wanted to edit since high school, since I was like 17, which I feel like back then was a little more rare. I grew up in Northern Virginia, the suburbs of DC. And when I said I wanted to become an editor, I think my parents were like, for books, like copywriting, you don't really like to write. Like, what are you talking about? I always loved theater and reading and basically storytelling my whole life. And I went to a science and tech high school. And in that school, you had to choose a research lab your senior year, and they had a video technology course. So I chose that. I thought, oh, I can, be in the videos or whatever. I didn't really know much about film. And I fell in love with editing itself, the actual craft of editing. And I decided this is what I was going to do with my life and applied to film school and went to USC. And I guess the rest is kind of history. I feel really lucky because I've gotten to do it for so long that I've gotten to really do every level at this, in my coming up in the post world. And I think that's been incredibly helpful. I can still actually remember the first cut, the cut I made that made me want to edit. And it was just really simple. It was like a guy running from like a wide shot to a close up. But it was amazing to me because it was two different takes, but it looked so seamless. It blew my mind for what, my 17-year-old mind. This is like the coolest thing ever.
That is amazing. Wait, is this like VHS to VHS?
Yes, it is VHS to VHS. They had this whole, high tech room of like floor to ceiling, like big decks. And it was really cool.
You had that in high school?
Yes, because it was like a technology based
school.
Awesome. Yeah, so it was very cool.
That's shockingly similar to my experience. I grew up outside of DC. And
really?
I was also in like a magnet cap high school. I was actually in the magnet, which was like computer science. But then I like started this film and video club because I was like somehow into this. You know what I mean? I didn't know anything about editing, but we would make these movies and we would edit in camera. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
because it was like I forgot at the time it was high 8. It was like a high 8 camera, digital, and. Anyway, that's shockingly similar. So how did you even know about editing? Like, I don't think in high school, like it wasn't until like Pulp Fiction came out where I was like, the director, like people made this movie. You know what I mean? Like, what was the point where you were like, oh, this is a craft and people are like putting these together?
Well, what's really funny is I remember the first film I made in that class. And I didn't know anything about editing, so I shot it like a play. Like every scene was blocked as if we were sitting in the audience. And then I saw other people's films when they screened them and I went, oh, wow, they shot, inserts and close-ups and they have like these different things, but I had never studied film in that way. I mean, I'll admit it. I probably shouldn't, but I didn't. Before then, I had not been like a film nerd, before that. So I hadn't studied film like that. I didn't really look at it in that way. I watched things for the story and how they made me feel. I grew up going to Blockbuster and I loved old movies. I watched every Esther Williams movie I think that's ever been made. And probably a lot of people listening to this do not even know who Esther Williams is. She's like a synchronized swimming star, $1 Million Mermaid. All of that kind of stuff. So I watched very old school movies growing up. And so I didn't really understand editing at all. And then when I saw that, and then on my next film I did in that class, I, tried to learn how to do that and shot different coverage. That's when it's like my whole mind just was like, wow, this is really
what grade
cool.
Was that? That was in high school?
Yeah. So It's a whole long, convoluted thing, but you have to take a prerequisite before your senior research lab. So you get to take one video class as a junior, and then your like lab class is your senior year. You do it for the whole year. So for after my junior year, that's when I did all that in the little prerequisite class, and I actually went away that summer to like a film camp in Philadelphia and got to be like off on my own, and like in the edit bays, as a teenager, like late at night. And it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I came back and I was like, this is it. I'm going to film school. I'm going to be an editor.
That's awesome. Oh my God. I went to film school for like a minute. Like I went to Oberlin College, and they had like my first January term. They have something called a January term. You could do whatever you want. And I wrote this film in high school, and I made it like my first.
Oh, that's
January.
awesome.
And that was like VHS to VHS. And then I had I was already making them in high school, like on the camera, you know what I mean? But that was my first time editing like shots together, you know what I mean? Like you said, it's like magic, it's like, oh my God.
It is magic.
And then
you mentioned that you did in-camera editing. That was one of our first projects in film school.
Oh yeah.
And even then, even though I had this little bit of experience, I wrote this script that like every other scene was a different location though. So I was like running all around town to try to edit this together in camera. And I went, oh yeah, you learn a lot.
That's still a thing, right? I mean, contain thrillers and contain horrors.
Yep.
Running around. I always enjoyed the running around aspect of it. I remember I made this short that went to Tribeca, and one of the development execs for Jane Rosenthal was like, check out, they really liked the short, but they were like, look at this Wes Anderson short. Like he did the whole thing in this hotel room. You know what I mean? And I remember watching it. I'm like, dude, like, I get what you're saying, but man, they spent a fortune on this compared to what I spent. Like you could see the jibs and the dollies and the lighting and you know what I mean? I was like, yeah, you can do a lot in one room, but you can also spend a lot of money in one room too,
For sure.
But anyway, it was, that's a fascinating. Do you mind if I ask what year did you graduate high school? I'm just trying to place.
Yes. See, you're aging me. No, it's fine. 2002.
2002. Okay. Yeah. So what were the key movies of your formative years?
Well, I mean, besides Esther Williams, which sounds like insane, I would say really TGIF, which is not movies, but Friday Night Pizza, TGIF, Step by Step, Family Matters, like all that. That was like my favorite day of the week.
Okay.
Watching those. That was awesome.
That's, what about wait, those are TV shows though, right?
Yeah, I know they're TV shows. That's a very good. I'll say this: my favorite movie of all time is Singing in the Rain, and that is a movie that I can watch over and over again. And I watched it a lot. I know I'm like a grandma. I go way back. I loved really early Hollywood.
Where did you even watch these movies? Like in high school?
I mean, I would rent them from Blockbuster. I guess the Blockbuster on the corner. Yeah, this is where I got them all. No,
we would go to Blockbuster every weekend. I mean, every weekend religiously. Yeah. And then this video store cropped up that was super cool called Video American, and it was American. Like they spelled it like in a French way, you know what I mean? And they had it organized by country and director. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And that was like that was another mind blowing thing when you start to see the lineage of like a director or a writer or an actor, you start to look at it in a totally different way from Blockbuster, where it's more like programmed by new release and, genre, but it's not like storytelling genre per se. It's more just like comedy or action or, horror. Anyway, okay. So you graduated high school early 2000s, 2001, you said? 2002. And all right, so yeah, you had a lot of great movies. Like me, the 90s was like an epic era, but it doesn't sound like these movies were speaking to you.
I would say one, because by the time later in high school, when now that I was into this, I was obsessed with Moulin Rouge. It's actually the movie that I talked about in my interview at USC. So I got, and I think that kind of opened my eyes up to like really more flashy editing in that way,
Mhm.
really stylized, really vibey.
Okay.
And I still love that movie. I think my husband would probably not love me saying this on the podcast, but he had actually never seen it. And so we actually watched it not that long ago. And I still loved it just as much.
That's awesome.
Movie.
That's awesome. Wow, that's like fascinating. I'm just trying to get a sense of
I'm a
your
musical gal.
taste and everything.
Musicals, you know, and I think that goes a lot with editing. I find editing to be very musical. So like I grew up singing, dancing. My parents were big into musical theater. My mom had been a theater teacher, you know, so this type of, I think knowing them, it would make more sense of why I was into old movies because they were obsessed with musicals. We would go to plays a lot, that type of stuff. So that was just kind of what we did as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have cable. So, you know, I wasn't one who got to, and they were very into school. It was all about school. So like TV was not, you know, a daily activity. I really showed them. Look at me now. That's what I do for a living.
Do you watch a lot of
Take
TV
that.
outside of editing, or do you?
I try to. I have to admit that when you are working, it's really hard because you are in front of the screens, you know, 10 to 14 hours a day, depending on the gig you're on. And you do sometimes want to not do that in the few
Sure.
hours you have. But I do try as much as possible because I mean, I love it. I love seeing everything. There's so much incredible content. I mean, it's still so hard to keep up with everything. There's so many great shows.
Yeah. It's impossible to keep up with everything. You know what I mean? But it's just too much. It's like you know. But that's kind of nice because you can kind of just like swim through the ocean of movies and TV shows. Okay, so wait, let's I'm just trying to track it all. So you're going to USC.
Yes.
And yeah, tell me about your experience there.
It was great. You know, I think moving to California was a big adjustment, you know, from the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But the program is really spectacular. They had incredible editing facilities, got to learn Avid, fell in love with Avid. I feel like it really prepared me for a career in post by them having those classes and forcing us to use Avid. Because back then, you know, it was like Final Cut was the big hot thing. And so a lot of people who were doing, you know, who had done some editing have been doing stuff on that. Like we ended up getting that my senior year in high school because I really pushed for it because I wanted to try it. But being able to learn on Avid really early, I think was incredibly helpful. Yeah, and then after film school, you know, I took every editing class I could while I was there, and I did a really traditional path after, which I'm really grateful for. I was a personal assistant to like a showrunner, and then I was a post PA in features, and then an apprentice, a second, a first, and then I, you know, had got an opportunity to cut. So I got to do kind of every level, and I think you learn a lot that way. There's so much more to the job than just the actual craft of editing. You know, running a cutting room, the politics, you know, all the different things that are required, what's required of assistants. You know, you need to know that as an editor too, what they're supposed to be doing. How do you hire someone? What do they need to know? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's so yeah, what were some of the formative moments there in terms of like working your way up? I also did assistant editing before like lead editing on movies, but I didn't really do the post PA. I was more like in the realm of just making things in the festival circuit and then jumping into movies through that. It was interesting, like in New York, I was never really in LA. I went to LA briefly, after a movie in Sundance that I directed and wrote, and I just tested it out, which was cool. I liked LA, but in New York, it was like all word of mouth. You know what I mean? The industry is very small there, and somebody sees that you can tell a story, and they saw the rough cut, and they didn't believe you would ever come out with this thing because they thought it was trash. You know what I mean? And that was like somebody on the outside, like seeing that is basically what led to editing. You know what I mean? Because somebody was like shot another film and they saw it was a mess and they were like, well, I saw this other mess and it worked out. Let me like, why don't you meet David? And they, and then it just started like rolling. I never really intended to edit, you know what I mean? Like, but it was more like I fell into it really, but nonetheless, yeah. What was your, and then one of those shorts won South by, and then it was all of a sudden it was like, all right, working for Barry Levinson and this and that, and even like assistant editing, you're just like, I'm sure you've worked with some great people. It's amazing to watch like a good director like do their thing, you know what I mean? Or like a great editor like just turn a scene into like something magnificent out of nothing, you know what I mean? Or it seems so bad at one point, and then there's so much there. So take me through the, I mean, that's a big journey to go from.
It's a big journey.
Like assisting, or, these are titles that in New York almost don't even exist. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like, I mean, it's more formalized in LA. It's more it's more tracked. You know what I mean? Like post PA. Yeah, occasionally I did like a Scott Rudin movie. We had a post PA. You know what I mean? But a lot of the indies, even with like Blum or Levinson or this or that, like there's no post PA, you know what I mean?
Get your own coffee and lunch.
Exactly. But yeah, tell me, I'm sure like there was some moments there.
I mean, all of them had incredible moments. I mean, I'm really grateful. My first job, I was the assistant to Ian Gervitz, who was a writer, director, showrunner. He was doing his own film himself, and so I did everything. I was on set, during shooting. I was reading lines off camera as I was standing, with the actors. I would pick his daughter up from school. I'm pretty sure I tied the bows on his wedding invitations. I did everything. And then he also let me be the assistant editor on the film because he knew that's what I really wanted to do. So that was just an incredible experience. And after that, I ended up, eventually most of my assisting was for the editor, Peter Teschner, who's incredible. I'm so grateful to him. He gave me the opportunity to apprentice, and then I became his second. And he brought me on to learn Avid Script Sync because he wanted to try it out. And so that really changed a lot for me because I am obsessed with Script Sync.
Tell me about Script Sync.
So basically, you create the line script in the Avid. So you get this visual roadmap to everything. You can click on every single time they say that line. You can search it. Now with the AI functions, you can search all sorts of stuff. You can search every time they said hello in all of the different scripts. So you can find a word you need or things like that. And it's really helpful when you have someone in the room. They can see everything really fast. And for me, it's very important it's done accurately. I don't rely on the AI transcription. I have my assistant editor do the Script Sync manually because then we can trust the tool, later on that it's correct. But with improv, and I think that's one thing. So I worked with Peter on a movie, Horrible Bosses, and the amount of improv on that film was absolutely insane. Probably still the craziest one I've ever experienced. And I had to figure out a way to organize that so that they could use it. And that's really what developed my organization of how to work with large amounts of improv. And I organize things by character. I have a lot of color coding. I section things out. That way you can find things because the script itself, if you start adding in every line they say, you can't find anything. So you really have to organize it in a way that an editor can use it and how they're going to use it. You have a button at the end of the scene. I'll organize everything by character. So it's like all of your lines would be here and all of my lines would be here because I can mix and match whatever I want. I don't need each thing we say transcribed in each take. I just need to know everything both of us said because I'm going to cut back and forth. I need to be able to find whatever the director is asking for quickly. So that was a very important, I think, moment in my career. And obviously watching Peter work all those years, I learned so much He was a great mentor, and I'm very, very grateful. And then after that, I actually ended up being first assistant for the amazing Patrick Donvito. And we did this TV movie for John Avnet. And I was very excited to become a first. And after that, they were jumping onto these web series that YouTube was doing with Fox. It was like the race to streaming. It was before House of Cards. It was like everyone was trying to get into this new world. And I wasn't going to do those. I wanted to keep assisting in features. I didn't really want to assist. It was like the first new media contract. It was like $0, to do these things. And I think, I don't know, a couple weeks in or something, I don't even remember. Patrick called and he's like, I got a movie. You have to come cut these. And so I went in, and the director, producer, John Avnet, had me live audition for the gig. He said, here's a scene, cut this, let's see what you can do. Come get me when you're done. So luckily I had been cutting indies and shorts and anything I could get my hands on basically since college on the side, so I was still practiced, and I luckily passed the test. And so I got to do all of those series for him, and they were these amazing short form, female focused, all about different women. And so it was so up my alley of taste and character driven. And it was all of these different incredibly experienced directors that were coming in, huge directors, big actors. It looked great. And I kind of call it my editing boot camp. I got to learn very quickly that different directors want very different things in the room. They like to work in very different ways. And I had to kind of do that. And since they were short form, it was very fast to kind of change how you operate in the room. And so I'm very grateful to everyone for those opportunities.
Let's examine a couple of quick things. One, how do you define editing or being an editor?
I look at the editor as the guardian of the story. That's really how I look at it. We are there to protect, the overall storytelling and to try to bring the director creator's vision to life while still preserving the special things that are there. They call editing the third writing, and it's like helping preserve the vision while still bringing what's really special and new and different to light in the edit. And to me, what I really love about editing is it's kind of like a puzzle. I'm not a big stare at a blank screen person. Writing was always very intimidating to me, to have that blank, nothing is there on the page. I really like having the pieces to work with, because there is still so much you can do. And now with VFX, I mean, triple split screens, all sorts of crazy stuff we can do, but it does give you some guidelines. And I really enjoy working within, some guidelines. I like that puzzle aspect to it a lot.
No, absolutely. I know what you mean. It's a different form on the page and on the screen. I mean, these are two different art forms, and I remember making it land on the page is very different than making it land on the screen. That was one thing that Barry Levinson was talking about on one of the movies we did. He said, on the page, and I really found this to be true. Like, that's part of why I remembered it. He was full of gems, don't get me wrong, but this one really rung true for me. It was like, on the page, there's a beginning, middle, and end in every scene, because that's how it lands on the page, whereas on screen, you're shaping sequences, not scenes. And so you really usually end up with one or two of those, you know what I mean? In any given scene, you might take the beginning and the middle, you might take just the middle, or, and then sometimes the stuff on the floor will end up somewhere else, you know what I mean? Unexpectedly. But that was one other thing Harold Ramis told me when I was much younger. I had a film at Austin, and he said something also kind of interesting. This is kind of a tangent into writing, but he was like, I found it very helpful as an editor, because what he said a lot of the first time directors go through, which is like, the first act, there's always a couple scenes that are just gonna just going to go on the floor. You know what I mean? Now you can do it in the writing if you're experienced, you know what I mean? Because most people start at the beginning of the script. Not everyone, you know, everyone has a different process, but a lot of people start writing their movie and they're writing their way into it. So they end up writing all this exposition. And then by the time people are talking in the second act, without even thinking about it, they're like establishing what was established earlier, you know what I mean? But now the writer knows it. And so I remember him telling me that, and he was like, I don't know, we were just having a coffee in Austin, like it wasn't formal, but he mentioned that. And then I remember there were several times like editing movies where I was like, that was very helpful, because I was like, you know what, these two scenes, like, we don't need them, you know what I mean? And then it's like suddenly it's all like clicking, you know what I mean? And I wanted to hear your take on the being an editor, you know what I mean? Because it's something, like you mentioned, the politics, and like there's all these other sides of editing that people don't, on the outside, they're not aware of. They don't think about it. But to me, like having been in the thick of it, you know, that's really, for me, the challenging part of editing. Like the easy part is doing the story. Like, yeah, I can make a story all day. I don't even need a story. You know what I mean? Because I could just use voiceover or just use the music, or, you know what I mean? That's a craft that is like very simple. You know what I mean? But the craft of people and egos and politics and, you know, producers that want one thing in the cut, and executives that want one thing in the cut, and directors that want one thing, you know what I mean? That's where it gets like a very challenging craft. And so like the way you define it and what you believe it is, you know what I mean, is very interesting to me. So as the guardian of the story, I mean, where does the director fit in versus the producers? Like, are you just kind of whatever's best for the story, or are you gonna lean towards the director's vision, or how does that work?
I mean, you know, we have to be very honest that we are getting hired by people generally to do this, you know, and so you do have to take their, you know, that kind of political environment into account, you know, and I think it depends on the projects. You know, I've worked on shows where the director has final cut, so it doesn't matter what the producers think. And I've worked on things where that is not the case. So that is always something the advice I give to less experienced editors is make sure you know that going in. Because I remember there was one thing I thought that the director, you know, was an indie or something. Then I learned that the producers had final cut and they really wanted X, Y, and Z. And every time I tried to do it, the director would not want me to do that. And I found out he didn't know that he didn't have final cut. They hadn't told him. So that became my like first question, you know, of any indie that I had taken on, is like, well, who has final cut on this, you know? And so that is the lessons you learn early on. I think one thing is I always tell people in an interview, you know, when I'm up for a film or a show, is that I don't consider myself a yes man in that way. I will always tell you truthfully and respectfully what I think. And I'm more than happy to do it the way you want to do it. You know, it's their show. But I'll always be honest with them. That way they know they have someone who is giving honest feedback. Because I think it's really valuable. You know, I can't count, you know, the number of times I'll have an idea or a pitch or something, and people aren't interested at that time, because that's part of the art of it too, is when do you bring up these ideas? When are people ready to hear these ideas? Or kind of like move away from what they thought and are starting to open their mind to the possibilities of what else we can do. I always make sure I don't want to have regrets. So I will wait till the right moment to bring something back up. I'm not going to lock without voicing one final time, hey,
how many
this
times
is something
will
you
bring it
consider?
up?
Probably twice. I would say twice. So the first time, and if all is great and it's, you know, was the right time, you don't ever have to bring it up again. You know, you try it out and it worked or it didn't work or all of that. I've gotten lucky. I find generally you get lucky and they bring it up themselves later.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's had time to marinate, if it's a real big swing, it makes sense that, the writers and directors have sat with this material so much longer than us. They've thought about how it's going to, look and feel. And it takes a minute to kind of readjust to the realities of what we got and where we need to go now. And so to give a big swing early on, I mean, it makes sense that sometimes people are like, I don't know about that. But then, a few weeks go by and they're like, okay, that thing you brought up, let's do that thing. Let's just see that, that happens a lot. So,
or it gets
which is
echoed
great.
by someone else in a different way. Like,
sure. I mean,
a screening and a DP says something and it's like, it starts to circle back. It might not be the fix you had in mind, but it might address the same like underlying note or something.
I think that's the thing about editing is you really, can't have an ego about whose idea it was. We're all there to serve the story and the vision and the goal of the project. And it doesn't matter if it was my idea or someone else's idea, we're all trying to make the best art possible. And that's what we're there to do,
I
so
totally agree with that.
It doesn't matter. I don't need credit, editors, we are here, to me, it's like, we're here to help bring this vision to life and to help, like I said, protect the story. And, wherever the idea comes from, it's great. And I think something you said that's really interesting is that ideas, you might have an idea, a lot of times, and I definitely have noticed it throws people off. I'll throw out really bold stuff early on, or just say weird things that come to my mind. And I warn them that I do this because I think it sparks conversation. It may not be the right idea, but if I say it and it's not 100% right, they might go, that's interesting. That's not right. But wait, what if we actually did this other thing? I like to spark that creative conversation in the cutting room and just kind of, if I have an idea for an ADR line or a different structure and be like, I'm kind of thinking this is not fully fleshed out, but this is kind of where my mind's going right now. What do you think about this? To kind of have a dialogue, because I think that collaboration in the edit room is where things really start to sing, you get multiple minds kind of working this out. And then when you get notes, it's like, I actually love the notes process because then you really get to play. And people will have, it's like that. And when you start thinking about it in that way, you get a note from someone, a producer, studio, and, people might bristle and say, I don't like that note. Okay, that's fine. Maybe it wasn't the right idea, but why are they bothered at that moment? What is taking them out of the story then? Are they confused? Is, something's unclear, or is things too slow? Are they actually, they might say, oh, let's speed this up, but it actually might be the reverse. Maybe you want to get through it because you don't understand, because it's actually going too fast, because now you're confused. So now you're bored. So actually, if we slowed something down, you'd understand it and be more engaged. So it's really about, a lot of people say it's the note behind the note. What is the thing that's really sticking out or causing a little bump, and figuring out how to fix that and trying everything. I mean, I remember getting a note on a project and it was a huge swing. They suggested taking a scene and making it completely silent. It was a huge dialogue scene. Wow, that I never would have thought of that. And I said, well, let me just try it. Let's try it. Let's try it. If it's crazy, then we'll just say we tried, it doesn't work. And the thing about trying a note is you actually have to try. You can't just like do it exactly how they said and like, no, see, it doesn't work. You have to actually try to make it work. And it was brilliant. And it's how it ended up staying in the film. And it was beautiful. And it's, awesome. I just think I love learning things like that and having my mind, opened to something that I never thought about, That's why I love the collaborative notes process so much. I took us on a whole journey with this answer. That's I'm good at editing picture, not so much my speeches.
No, that's perfect. I had a lot of thoughts there. I just didn't want to break your train of thought. I mean, that very much resonates. I mean, I keep going back to like assistant editing for Barry Levinson, because like the no ego thing, that was like a big deal there. And no one ever talked about it, but it was like I was working with an editor who's a great editor and a great friend. His name's Aaron Yanes in New York, and he's done some amazing work. And I remember he would always say, "Oh, an idea jumped out at me." He would never say, "I've got an idea." You know what I mean?
Oh, I like
the
that.
phrasing was completely flipped. And ever since he said that, I took that with me, not just in editing, but like in all realms of film. You know what I mean? Because that
Yeah.
idea that it really is just like about execution. Like the ideas are, I feel like the ideas are just like in the ether, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like you're just like channeling them. And I remember reading like a Rick Rubin book that he wrote, like, you know, it was like self-help for artists type, but it was fun, you know what I mean? And I remember him talking about that, and I was like, wow, that's like exactly how I see it, you know what I mean? Just got to take the ego like completely out of it to like get to the heart of it all. But yeah, that's fascinating. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit
Sure.
to Horrible Bosses for a second, and just
Yeah.
because it sounds like you had a true mentor, you know what I mean? Like somebody that you worked with for quite a while. And like I was wondering like what you learned from them, you know, like what beliefs, what turns of phrase, like what did you pick up from
Oh,
them?
wow. I mean, honestly, so I don't even know that I can make a list. It's so much. Here's a really funny, and if he watches this, Peter, you'll remember this. One thing that he used to do, so I don't know how much, people know about what a continuity is, but basically it's like this document that lists every scene and tells you like a little description of the scene number, how long it is, what music is in it. And the studio uses it a lot to kind of follow along and take their notes so they can easily, discuss things. He would, every time I did the continuity, we would sit together and he would get out a red pen to mark up any mistakes that I had made in it. And what I love, that became an ongoing joke. And actually, once we were working on a movie and there was someone who had a red pen, and I put that picture on his door as his name card. What it taught me, though, was really valuable. The detail is incredibly important. I think it's incredibly important to be organized, to know where everything is, to have a comfortable cutting room, to make sure it's neat and inviting for the people coming in a very professional space. And I took that with me into all the smaller projects I did, all the small shorts and indies, and always made sure that we had the continuity, that there were not errors. I always QC. Even now, I'll QC my own stuff. I'll
Like
make
the
sure.
output, you'll watch
Yeah, the output,
or you
not
just
every time, but for, on a movie, if we're doing a family and friends or a preview, I will sit there and
oh,
watch
you
that cut.
gotta do it.
You
Or
have
I
to.
watch it like double time. I'm not gonna sit and watch like
I sit and watch it all. I don't want any, and it did teach me that. And I think it's incredibly valuable because people know they can rely on me. The directors and showrunners know that I am not going to let stuff slip through the cracks because I'm very detail oriented, and that gives them kind of the freedom to not worry about those things, and they can then focus, creatively on what's most important and not worry that the file is going to be wrong or this, that, and the other, or I'm not going to remember that to tell the VFX about this shot. They know that I've got it. And of course, with my amazing assistant editors and the other post team, have it under control. And I think that was incredibly valuable. And in Horrible Bosses in particular, in a more creative way, seeing what he did with that amount of improv, the jokes he created, because I knew everything. I transcribed every sentence that was ever done in that movie. Seeing how they made jokes out of different jokes was just mind-blowing, to see how they would combine different things in ways to make those two funny things even funnier. That was very cool as well. Because I had never worked on, as in high school, they're called, things that had that level of acting, that type of comedic improv. And so to be able to have transcribed it all myself to organize it for him. And then when the cuts would come out, I could really see what they were trying and playing with, be like, oh, they took this thing from here and that from there. And now they're doing this whole other moment. And that was really eye-opening on what you can do as an editor.
Absolutely.
So, a lot.
No, it's I remember I was like trial by fire, you know what I mean? I remember making my first film out of school, and like I was working at this little place called the Film Shack, and they had everything. They had 235 packages, 216s, sound, a 3-ton truck. It's like a little mini studio, you know what I mean? And I made my first like short there. We shot 35. It was like an awesome production. I was production managing at that time, so I knew everybody. Put it all together, which was a great job for that, actually. Like just for being in the habit of just like being out there in the world, you know what I mean? As opposed to working in post, like it's very like it's its own little world, like in a ecosystem, you know what I mean? In the production, you're just like out in the wild, you know what I mean? And I was editing that film for 3 years. Like it was 12 minutes, 10 or 12 minutes long. And just like I was working a full-time job, and I was kind of like figuring out that when I was really like figuring out like how to tell a story, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the script was amazing. That writer went on to be like a New York Times best-selling writer.
Wow.
And the script was amazing. And it was all about like her sort of world that she grew up in. And so I knew all the people intimately, and like that also like added a layer of depth to it all. But then she was at the time more of a short story writer, and this was a short film, and they are like very different forms, you know? And so we played with the structure of it, like just resequencing it. And then there was some DP that I knew who was a very nice guy, and he was like, he had edited this other short that I really loved, and so he was like, try this, like don't cut the whole scenes and put them all together. Just put like 5 seconds of the scene and order it the way you think it should be ordered, and then just watch it in your mind. Like, don't try to watch it on the screen yet. You know what I mean? You're just getting a glimpse of what it would look like in this order. But in that way, it was like, and I'm learning how to do nonlinear editing for the first time, you know? Like in college, I was on a Media 100, but now like Final Cut is coming out, and you know, this is when you were transferring like 35, and you had DAT tapes and all of this, you know, and you had to sync it, and you know, so I'm learning the whole thing. And then and I remember watching it like that, and I haven't really done that on feature films, but at that time it was very helpful to kind of like imagine the movie very quickly in different ways, you know, and find the order that really made sense for like setup, raise the stakes, climax, twist, payoff, you know, and then you could see the whole thing, you know what I mean? And then once you could see it, then you could do it. But it was like this was like a whole process of like 6 weeks to sync the stuff, and like, you know, getting it transferred and finding vendors, and you know what I mean? It was like a whole thing. But story wise, that was where I do feel like there was a moment where it was like, okay, now it makes sense. You know what I mean? I don't even know. Wait, I don't even remember how I got on that topic. But
it's interesting you talk about doing that 5-second thing. So I use scene cards. I don't know if you ever use those where you have the pictures. So
yeah.
I rely on that a lot. I even have a digital version for, you know, during COVID, I kind of developed this because I still wanted to have access to that sort of thing, but I didn't have a place to put them. And so that way you can kind of lay out your restructures without having to go in and do that. And you can see really fast, oh yeah, wait, no, she's wearing different clothes. We can't do that. Or, oh, wait, this doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z. Without having to try to lay it all out and watch it down and then discover it 40 minutes into the movie why that doesn't work. So yeah, I use those for that a lot.
Yeah, I remember I worked with one editor when I was assisting, and she she would line the entire edit suite with
Yep.
printouts, like
Yep.
all around. Like for me, honestly, like it just made my head spin. Like I was like I guess like just used to do it. Like you said, like this room being like calm and like here I am in my messy home office with kids, but you know what I mean? Like I'm into like just serene, you know. And I remember just being like man, it's like spinning in here. But I guess it's a very popular move, like, you know, so to each their own, you know what I mean? It's kind of fun to see the stills, you know. So I guess you know, that I could see that working, like in screenwriting, you know, a lot of people do the cards, you know what I mean? I've certainly done them. I don't feel like I've had major breakthroughs in the cards, but it's a great like way to just like get going, you know what I mean? Because you're just writing like your favorite moment of a scene, you know what I mean? I did work on one movie that had a lot of improv as well as a comedy. It was a Danny McBride, and he was
I love Danny McBride. Danny, if you're watching, hire me.
so hilarious. That guy is, thank God he exists. I can't wait to read his new book. Like, have to check that one out. I'm a huge fan.
I worked on Land of the Lost.
Land of the Lost?
Yes,
Wait,
which Danny McBride was in.
I gotta see this.
Yes, you will enjoy it then. Yes, that was the movie I was an apprentice on. So that's when I became a big Danny McBride fan.
Land of the Lost. Damn, I haven't.
It was it's Will Ferrell and Dan McBride, and it's a movie remake of the old series. You know, old series and things are my thing. So clearly.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I feel like you know, it's interesting because I don't know you that well. In the past, I'm always doing like interviewing my friends, you know what I mean?
Well, now you know me pretty well.
That's true, but I want to get like deeper into like really the values and like the things that you like, the habits. Like, you know, they say like sow a thought, reap a habit, sow a habit, reap a character, sow a character, you know what I mean, reap a story, like that kind of thing. Just like usually I feel like we get like a little deeper, you know what I mean? But it's okay, like you know what I mean, we just met like an hour ago. So give it, all right, let's just do the top, like give us a top 5 or 10, like top 5 or 10 like yeah, like go-to movies, unless you're more TV, you know what I mean? Or we didn't even talk about beef. I mean, do you want to?
We didn't even, I know there's so much to talk about. We could go on for 2 hours. This would be the world's longest podcast.
Give us the all right, let's, only because it's super fun for people to get to know you in a way. Like, what is that? Give us top 5 movies, like all time, any genre.
Okay, let's see. Well, Singing in the Rain, which we have established. I'll give you another old one, Meet Me in St. Louis, which if anyone out there loves that movie, let's talk about it because I love that movie. Something I shouldn't admit to, but I will, is I hadn't seen Ex Machina like till way too late in life, and it is one of my favorite movies of all time.
It is.
And usually when I watch movies that people say are so brilliant, but I hadn't seen them when they came out or things like that, I'm always like a little underwhelmed, and I can't stop talking about it. I never stop talking about it.
It's a brilliant film. You got me with that one. Like, it's absolutely amazing.
It's so brilliant. So that one, phenomenal. And well, we talked about Moulin Rouge. Musicals are my jam. I would say I do, a favorite from back then was Office Space. I love Ron Livingston and
Mike Judge, right? Yeah.
15 Pieces of Flair, Jennifer Aniston, you know.
No, I'm a huge Mike
bashing
Judge
the printer.
fan.
I still think about it all the time. Every time a printer gives me a hard time. So
less and less these days, I bet. Printers are kind of fading out. I still have a laser printer over here, but more and more it's just like shoot me the digital thing. But I know what you mean. Mike Judge is a brilliant man. He's done some incredible work. I met him at a Starbucks once, but there's not much more to tell to the story, unfortunately. I would love to have some gem from Mike Judge.
End scene.
I do think exactly. I handed him a coffee. Here you go, Mike Judge. let's see. I got into animating recently. Uh,
Really?
yeah, I started doing like some serious animating, and it made me think of Mike Judge because he started in Texas, and I have a feeling he was animating largely because he was in Texas. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of film down there. It's like a community type art form. So, um,
Well, I will say that one of the shows I did recently, Mo, is shot in Houston.
oh, interesting. Okay, how is Mo?
Yeah.
Or before we talk about Mo, how is it? Yeah, all right. Let's talk about beef for a second. Let's
Okay.
talk about first of all, like introduce people to beef. We are overwhelmed with media and the movies and TV, and so give us the pitch.
Oh boy. I probably shouldn't because Sunny will kill me because I'll do it poorly. But Beef, so Beef is a true anthology series. And when I say a true anthology series, season 1 has absolutely nothing to do with season 2. I only saw one Easter egg in the whole thing. And that's it. There are no characters, no same locations, none of it. So like you think about a True Detective or White Lotus, there's always something, it's like a detective thing, a case, or White Lotus always has the resort. This is just two completely different beefs, if you will. And
So
this season, beef is the through line, is conflict. And so this season, what was really incredible, the cast, Oscar Isaac, Carey Mulligan, Kaylee Spaney, Charles Melton. I mean, this true ensemble, and it was really a much more kind of slow burn, passive aggressive beef than season 1, which was the road rage. And so this is really a relationship conflict, a generational conflict, class conflict. It's so dense this season. And you really get to deep dive into people's relationships. And I mean, for me as an elder millennial, I think he captured that experience really incredibly in the series, in a way that I hadn't seen before. So, but I won't give any more spoilers.
Okay.
See, I would be terrible at pitching, but it's a really great show.
No, I thought that was pretty good. I mean, the anthologies, I'm just a fan of anthologies. You know what I mean? I don't think of them as going from season to season because I guess as more of a movie person. You know what I mean? I'm like Sin City was an anthology. Pulp Fiction. It's not an anthology, but you could almost see it like that. Sort of, but it's in chapters. I don't know. It feels more cohesive than an anthology, but that I do love that concept. Yeah. Let's see. So how do you what have you learned on? That's quite a cast. Like what do you
Yes.
That makes the job easy, I'd imagine, to some degree. Like
yes, I mean, we were so privileged to be able to cut their work. I think the challenge becomes with that large of an ensemble, you have limited amount of time. And it was, like I said, the season is so dense. How do you fit all of that in one episode and then 8 episodes? You have essentially 3 and then 4 couples, plus other characters. You have all of these conflicts, all of these themes to get across. Every single frame mattered. We could not waste a frame. And so much of what happens in the show is the subtext. It's in the looks, it's in the reactions. All of that detail really makes a huge difference. I mean, we had so many great performances. That means you could choose from everything. They gave so many great options that you really could shape a scene in so many directions, and with so much nuance. And that's where the challenge became. It's like, well, this is good. This is good. This is good. What do we need from this scene? We talked a lot about perspective character. Whose scene is it? What do we need to get from this scene for that character? And then the other characters, how do we make sure the audience is with these people who are doing a lot of unlikable things and making really poor choices, but we still need to empathize with them. We need to know why. we need to see the humanity in them, and how do we make sure that's still at the forefront of all of this. So I think the detail work was really where the challenge was in the season. And of course, trying not to leave any gold on the floor, because everything was so good. So we definitely had to figure out how to make sure everything got in there.
Yeah, that's and did you have any, like, in the streaming world? I haven't done a lot of, I don't know if I've done any Netflix streaming. Like, do you because when I worked at Vice, it's on TV, and it's like, well, there's act outs and there's, time constraints and everything. At Netflix, is it just like whatever you guys want to do?
I think I would assume it depends on the show, because I think there are still, is a show an hour-long show? Is it a half-hour show? I mean, I think there's a lot of rules and things with all the unions in the studios and how things, all of that kind of stuff. But what's great, I mean, working for Netflix is awesome. I mean, you do get so much artistic flexibility. I mean, they really trusted, Sonny and his process, and, let us really do the work that needed to be done. And yeah, it is a really nice to have that creative flexibility, and not have to worry about those types of things.
And I've read a lot about these two-handers, with the stars, and okay, Eddie Murphy's camp wants to keep. Now I'm just making up Eddie Murphy's name. I'm not talking about the literal ones I read about, but it'll be like, imagine 48 hours, or Nick Nolte wants this in, and Eddie Murphy wants that in, and if you follow one note or the other, it becomes their movie, obviously. You know what I mean? Was this a thing? Like, did the stars camps kick in their notes? Did they press for their own, storylines and screen time?
I mean, I know they all watched everything. I'm sure they had a lot of conversations with Sonny, and I think everyone really, first of all, everything was so good that I think that took the forefront. I think everyone who had thought really wanted to make the best piece possible. There was nothing with egos or they want this. I mean, I think any note that I ended up hearing, myself, was always very much in service to the story and making the project better. And what's amazing about working with Sonny is he is such a visionary. He has such a unique tone of voice and such an amazing sense of humor, is that everyone really trusted him to kind of lead the way and take all of that into consideration and do what was best for the show as a whole. So it's always a privilege to be able to work on something like that.
I see. Everybody was very humble. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you get a good project.
No, that is, I agree. And so, all right, so you've got, then not leaving anything on the floor that's gold. I remember Barry used to do that at the end of each movie. He would just be like right when we were kind of locked, he would be like, all right, let's go through the dailies, you know what I mean? And that was like the last process, you know what I mean? And you never know what could happen if some note came up. He would change anything at the last second if he wanted to, you know what I mean? But that was kind of the general process, was like work to a lock, and then when it's all done, watch all the dailies, just make sure we didn't miss some gold, you know what I mean?
I like that idea.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's really cool.
He's not really rushed, you know what I mean? Like some projects are like constrained by resources, and so that's a bit of a timely thing to do at the end, you know what I mean? But it's fantastic if you can do it.
Yeah.
And he can do it for sure. It's not a problem.
Awesome.
Post is like a relatively inexpensive, when you look at the whole process, right? It's like you've got a few people on staff. It's not, I mean, in the finishing phase, okay, the color and this and that, but the end of editorial, to extend it is not a huge deal for a big company. So that was a lot of fun. I guess one thing that I've run into is like having to figure out like the personality of the individual director a little bit, or the pecking order, the producers, finding out how to work with people in a way that is best for them and still be the guardian of the story. It's like,
Yes.
so one thing that I remember like talking to, like, so I remember there was like a screening. I've done a couple of Alec Baldwin movies, and on one of them, we watched it together, and Alec expressed his notes like super enthusiastically. You know what I mean? Like nobody was like more passionate than him about the movie, and it was amazing. Like it just energized you. You know what I mean? And it was fun to see him react. Like he was the kind of guy who he would like get up and jump at the screen and scream like, "Yeah, fucking kill his ass." You know what I mean? Because it's like it's like a cop movie. The good guys finally get the bad guys. You know what I mean? And he's having a lot of fun. But he did have a lot of notes. You know what I mean? They were all like 100% justified. You know what I mean? Now you could debate them. You know what I mean? You don't have
Sure.
to hit them. You know what I mean? You could have a different view on the movie. It's totally respectable. You know what I mean? But I remember that moment because it happens on every movie where there's like some note or like, some producer who's insistent on something, but the director, or like wherever the note comes from, it doesn't always agree with whoever's in charge. Sometimes the producer's in charge, like you said, and that's happened before, in my experience as well. Where anyway, so he expresses them super clearly, and then he doesn't go for number two. You know what I mean? He doesn't say it again, even if it doesn't change. Not to the director. He might say it to me or somebody else. You know what I mean? But he says it so strongly the first time, and then he just drops it. You know what I mean? And I guess I've got more of your take because I'm in the edit suite too. It's a long period of time, so there are other opportunities. You know what I mean? But that has been. It's a tricky thing to navigate, and sometimes it's like I'll express it to whoever else is in the circle that I know the director's talking to, because if they agree with me, they might bring it up. If they disagree with me, then maybe I'll be persuaded to see it more the other way. You know what I mean? I don't really press it as an editor. I really just support I never phrase it as the guardian of the story. I love that phrasing of it, actually. But I really saw it as like supporting the director, although there have been times when the director is not in charge, and then it is supporting the producer or whoever, And there's been times, director unfortunately is fired or, had a certain number of weeks and then replaced or whatever the case may be. Anyway, it's just such a fascinating like dynamic there.
I think something you hit on that's really interesting is reading people, and I think when people find this path, generally they're pretty good at that, because what we do for a living is reading performance and, understanding how to make people feel a certain way or combining these two things to make something completely new. And I think you have to be very observant. And I think in that way, that helps with the other skill that is so necessary, which is understanding the personalities in the room and how to best support them and communicate in a positive way that allows for the creativity to thrive rather than shut down in a room. And so I think generally I found that, it kind of goes hand in hand. If you're good at editing, a lot of times you can be good at reading the people in the room and how to best work in that environment to make things go smoothly. It's all about reading people and, emotion and communicating. So to me, they kind of go together.
Yeah.
So I definitely thought when I pursued this path that I was going to be able to sit in a dark room by myself and do whatever I wanted to do. And turns out that isn't exactly the job.
That's funny. Did you ever edit on a Steam Deck, by the way?
In college, one class. I think we were the last class to get to do it. I mean, not a full thing, just, a little whatever we were doing. Yeah. But yeah, that was very cool.
No, totally. And do you ever use, have you played with Resolve, CapCut, Adobe?
I've done a little bit of of Premiere. I am, you know, there's things about it I think are incredible, the way their effects works and how it talks with After Effects and all that stuff. I am so reliant on the Avid trim mode and the script sync that it's hard for me. It would be hard for me to do something long form just because those are the two tools I use so much. And it's so much about how I operate in the timeline is with those that it would be hard to switch. I have done a couple shorter things in that, you know, but I have not done much with Resolve, but people say good things. It seems to be the new way.
I like it a lot. I haven't edited a movie in Resolve because I just don't want to find out something bad in the middle of a huge project. You know what I mean? But I love what they're doing. Like as a company, they innovate very quickly, and it works heavily with VFX and color. And the idea of like turning over so simply, you know what I mean, is interesting. I don't know. I mean, they all can get the job done. I love Adobe personally. Like I just like the touch and feel of it. You know, it's like I did edit on a Steam Deck growing up for 6 films. And so it feels like a little more tactile to me. You know what I mean? Like click, drag, there's like scrolling, rolling, I don't know. It's a little less clickety clackety and more like hands-on. But anyway, these are all kind of now we're going deep into like the edit world. Like no one's gonna listen to this. But I'm just curious. Now it's just like curiosity. I've also been working a lot in this like AI stuff. Have you been playing a lot with the video gen?
Not a ton. A little bit of 11 Labs for like temp ADR stuff, which is amazing. I'll never have to record a bad temp ADR line myself again. So everyone should be thrilled about that. It's like the best benefit so far.
That's amazing.
Not tons. I mean, I know that all these softwares are using some of it in the background, but I haven't done a ton myself in that world.
Okay. Yeah, I just started getting into it. It's interesting. Like I'm trying to it's exciting for me. Like I remember shooting like Fuji 500D and like different film stocks, and like now like every time a new model drops, I have the same feeling of like, oh, this is like when Vision 2 came out. It was like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like shooting EXR versus this or that. It's like Seed Dance and Kling Omni and Google Omni and da-da-da. And I'm just like, there is something kind of like amazing about it to me that I'm like super into. And that's what got me into animating, because I didn't like it for live photorealistic because the uncanny valley was something that bothered me. But in animation, like the uncanny, there's still an uncanny valley, but it can be very interesting. You know what I mean? To me, there's something in that's like fascinating, and as a storyteller, it's like, well, Lord have mercy, like, let's go. You know what I mean? Because you can do almost anything, and you can blend it with true live action too, like so seamlessly, But then there's the other side of it where you're just like, I try to remember like shooting film, and I'm like, when I was doing it, it was like photochemical finish, projection, obviously on 35, there was nothing else. And like the room was like an atmosphere, you know what I mean? You're like in a theater, like for almost like a stage play, you know what I mean? And and the pools of light and the depth of the image of like 35. I'm sure you remember looking at photos. Even if you look at an old like Kodak photo, it's a very different thing, you know? And these days, like all these new screens, like I was just thinking, like, there is no atmosphere anymore. You know what I mean? Like you're watching on a screen in a room and you're getting the content, you see the performance, but there's no atmosphere around it. Like even with a good TV, it's like, you just don't, it's the digital thing. And I love digital. Like it's like, but it's a different experience. You know what I mean? And so part of me is super excited about it. And part of me is like, it's got to all be about the story there, because there's nothing, it's all CG, you know, it's like King of the Hill, like, you know, I mean, there's some artistry, but you're mostly like watching the story, you know what I mean? The characters. And there is some, you know, then you see something like Christopher Nolan, you know, doing IMAX, which I haven't seen yet, you know what I mean? But
You can't get tickets.
is that the case? Yeah, but it's just
You
like,
can't get them.
yeah, well, there's also like they really did it. You know what I mean? It's like, remember watching like 007 and somebody's jumping out of a plane, and it's cool because you're like, damn, that dude really jumped out of a plane, you know? Whereas like you watch like Wolverine and you're like, I'm watching computer graphics. Like, you know what I mean? Like this guy might be falling off a truck, but you know, you're not really watching a real guy fall off a truck. There's a little less excitement. It's a little less risky, you know? And so I guess I'm still like wrapping my brain around what is happening now with the medium, you know, and like, where's this all going? You know what I mean? Like, and it's an interesting, I'm excited about it, but I'm also kind of like, you know, just trying to remember what we had, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's all for the best, but it is like very cool.
Oh, I'm sure not. I am definitely sure it is not all for the best. You know, I think going back to my like love of old movies, I think when people had to shoot on film and edit on film, you had to really think about what you were doing. You had to actually plan and consider, and every cut, you know, you would wear out that work print. You know, you had to keep everything so organized. You cut something out, you hang it in now what they call, you know, bins in the little Avid square, but it was actual rolling bins. You had to make sure you kept all that stuff because you might need it back. And you actually had to think about every choice you were making and why. And I think that's so important in storytelling. And you can still do that with the new tools, but it's also easy not to. You can just try a whole bunch of stuff and do a whole bunch of alts, but it's like, why are we doing all these alts? Is the reason behind it? Are we thinking about what we're doing and why we are trying these 7 ways? Or like, should we only be trying 2 other ways? What is the reason behind it? So you can just like spout out all this stuff, but you're not getting that human artistry and thought process and consideration when you can just do anything. And I think that's why I like editing in general, because you have those constraints, because you have to think about, okay, I have this and I have this. What are the options to do with this, and what am I trying to get to, and how do I manipulate the footage or create something new out of these pieces? And it requires me to think about it, of what am I trying to do? I can do these 7 things, but what is most important? And I think something in a series like Beef, it's like when you have all of these incredible performances and you have all of these well-written scenes, it's like, but what are we trying to do with this scene? I could do all these things, but what is the most important thing we need to get across in the whole series in this moment? And actually having to think about those things is what creates a really great story. And so if you have the ability to just create 100 things in AI without thinking about it, you're not getting a great story. You know, yeah, I mean, I agree, film looks better and all these things, but it's even just like what do they call it? The AI slop or something the kids call it now. It's like, you're not thinking about it. And I think those old, it's like, why now, you know, it's so funny. I think mine are in my garage, my old like digital cameras or whatever, you know, we used to have to take out. Now you just have your phone. And now my phone roll, I now actually try it to every month kind of go through and get rid of a bunch of stuff. Cause you know, you take 100 photos of the same thing. And then you can't even find the things you're looking for because your camera roll is a mess, or like I have 10 errors of the Avid, you know, in this day, and like you can't find anything. I want to show you this photo. You can't find anything, you know. So now I try to go in and I've put a reminder to like go in and like clean it up. That way I can actually enjoy it. But it used to be, you know, you had a limited memory card. You know, it's still digital, but you actually had to stand there and like push a button and like had a very, you know, like you have a Polaroid, that's why I still love photo booth strips and things. It's like where you actually have to just think about it and you have a limited option, I think sometimes
Yeah.
makes it more special, you know, and you can
No.
really enjoy those things more, you know. In college, I printed out photos. I have many photo albums and instead of a camera roll. And I think that's the same with all of this stuff. It's, you know, really being present in the moment and really thinking about what you're doing. And these digital and AIs, you can stop doing that. And that's where you stop creating art to me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely I've worked on some movies, even ones that were turned out fantastic, where it was like, all right, we're gonna try 6,000 things. You know what I mean? And that's, you know, and you know, look, I'm paid to do it, so let's do it. Let's go. But at the same time, I know what you mean about it's like mental chess. Like, I don't know if you ever played chess, but you can think like 6, 7 moves ahead, you know, and discuss it and think out another combination of 6, 7 moves ahead and see what it does without doing it all. Like, it almost, because it became so easy to just do it, you know, people are like, let's just see it. Let's just see it. Let's just see it. But you can also just kind of wear out your eyes and your sense of feeling if you're just like watching. So I have found like, you know, talking it out is,
And it's that conversation too. Because when you talk it out, you're actually learning, well, okay, I might try these 6 things, but if we don't have a conversation about why we're doing it or what's missing from the scene or what's, you know, the person is going for, those 6 options, none of them might work. But if you actually talk it through for a second, say, okay, if I do this, this might happen or this would happen. Like you're saying, you kind of plot it out and have these discussions. You'll come up with better ideas. You'll actually get to what's really the point of doing these things. And then you can actually make a better choice. And actually create all that does the things that you want, you know, versus just like 6. Let's go from the close up to this, to this, this. Okay, now let's go from this to this to this. And it's like, well, what are we actually trying to do?
Right.
Let's move the shots around. Do we want to be more with this person's perspective? Do we want to make sure we know this person is hurt? Do we want to make sure we know this person is mad? Are we trying to make sure we hit this line for clarity? You know, what do we need to make happen in this moment? And talking about those things, you know, having those conversations to me is really important versus trying, you know, 100 ways. And I'm happy to try 100 ways, but let's make sure we're doing it for that we know why we're doing that.
It's not until you really know why
that you can make it good.
You're done. You know what I mean? Until you know,
it's like, we don't know why
every shot is where it is and cuts where it cuts. Like, you know, that's really
you should always know why you're doing things. I remember I was on a show many years ago and with the director, and I had a new assistant, and we were sitting and the director was in, and then he started asking me a lot of questions of why. Well, why did you start the cue here? Why did you do this? And I remember that one, it was one of the last scenes, which I remember. And I just said, oh, well, he's like, I thought the song would start, you know, when you see the POV of the restaurant. And I was like, well, I started here because you see her eyes light up here. And that's where, and we tried it the other way. Actually, I don't think we did. I think he heard that and he said, okay, great, leave it there. He just was curious. And I remember my assistant saying, whoa, you had an answer to every question. Because he asked them really fast. It was their first time working together. And I said, well, yeah, I didn't have to plan for it because I don't make choices in the cut without having a reason. So I just know what they were. You know, I think one of, you know, you mentioned values and things. To me, that first editor's cut is about a really strong foundation. It's incredibly important. I've met editors who, you know, I've heard this before. They're like, oh, well, the director will tell you what to do later. Or they don't work late hours. To me, that editor's cut, I work the most hours. I study the footage. I watch everything. I make notes. I make sure everything is transcribed. I get really into the preparation, make sure everything is accurate. And that foundation has to be really strong because we have to work off of that. It's like building a house. It's like you need to know why you did everything. What are the reasons? And now we're going to work from that place going forward. So that's really important to me. Let's know why you're doing things.
Yeah, let's talk about the editor's cut. Like, what is your take on it. Like I've seen a lot of different routes to go. I like to try, like I fully load the first cut with music, sound effects, everything.
100%. Yes.
And I make big, bold, like shaping choices
Really?
to really make it pop like a real movie. Even though in 8 days, it's not ever gonna feel like a finished cut. You know what I mean? But I do that to see. But I've had different experiences with vastly different types of directors and editors, and some folks that don't want to do any music, you know, and some that want to, just treat the script very much more preciously. Like I'm just looking for big, bold, like kind of like, can I shape this? Can it click? Can it? Because I know we're going to get into all the weeds of it, but I just want to see, like broadly, as you know, that what is the shape of it going to be? You know what I mean? As a whole. So I'm much more like macro kind of focused at that time. But yeah, I guess I'm curious, like your take on the editor's cut, which way to go. And then I'm also curious about your take on music. Yeah. Like how
Okay.
you approach music.
Well, my take on the editor's cut's a little bit different than yours. I do hold off on big swings unless, so kind of my philosophy is this is the only time the director, and then if you're in TV, the showrunner, though that will be the director's cut, gets to see their film or show for the first time. They only get that one time
Okay.
only, to have a first impression of their film and to see how their vision is looking based on how they intended it. So I really try to save really bold swings for later, though if I feel like the cut will be unwatchable or they'll be completely taken out of the story if I do not do something, I will usually talk to them about it and say, hey, I have this thought. So like on one project, it's not even that big of a swing, but I wanted to reorder 2 scenes because the day they shot it, one of them was really cloudy and one was sunny, and it really bumped. You got really confused because you thought it was evening and then all of a sudden it was day. So like, oh, is it the next day? And I was like, I just want to switch these 2 scenes in the editor's cut. Are you cool with that? And he was like, oh yeah, sure, great, you know. But I don't like anyone to be like taken out if they're expecting something.
Okay.
You know, so I try to kind of talk about those things. I remember doing an indie once and there was kind of a big jump in story and it had a really bold swing. And I talked to the director and said, hey, I have a really big idea. I really want to put it in the editor's cut. I don't really want to like lay it out for you. Are you cool with this? And he was very excited. And in the end, it was this couple, they were about to break up and on a bridge. And it was hard to get to that moment. So what I ended up doing is like finding a piece of footage from before action during a reset where the guy was walking back to his mark. I reversed it so it looked like he's coming out of the shadows towards her, cut to a close-up, did a whole, you know, montage of memories and her thinking about it, you know, before this breakup of her kind of processing this. And I remember he called afterwards. He said, that's my favorite scene in the whole movie. And I didn't even write it. But I did try to, you know, I don't want anyone to be taken out because I think that first viewing is very sacred. I think you only get to have that first impression once. And like, I also think it's important if something doesn't work great, that they know that they should feel the pace of what they envisioned. Because even though I think, you know, the first 20 minutes is super slow, they need to know that for themselves. No, because totally. If I cut a bunch of stuff, they're going to want to see that anyway. And then they didn't really get to experience it for the first time as the audience gets to experience it. So then now we have to debate, you know, well, I like it now. Well, do you like it because it's different and you've been expecting it, or do you like it because it's working better? So I like to present things closer into the way they're expecting. But of course, your taste still goes into it because you're choosing performance. I don't always go off of the script supervisor's notes if they've left notes. You know, obviously if there's something that's like, definitely use this, you know, you want to. I made the mistake early not doing it, you know, so you have to weigh those things a little bit. And someone goes, well, I see you didn't like that. You didn't use it. And then you have to explain why I didn't like it. And they're like a bit put off, you know?
Yeah, I
So
have
you have to be careful.
I have a different method, and I'm not saying it's better or worse, but yeah, when my first assembly is everything, and it's fully loaded sound effects,
Yeah.
da 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 da. You know what I mean? But then the editor's cut is like, and it goes to the team because it's also like, I know the director is going to be jolted, of course, but it doesn't matter what you do. There's still, you know, they've got so much that they need to get in there. You know what I mean? That it's that's always going to be the process. But I do use the star takes even when I don't like them.
Really?
Yes, because they're seeing it every day on set, and so I just want them to know where they're at. Like, this is what I liked. This, okay, now I can tone down. But that may be overthinking it, but it has helped me a few times when producers are like, "Hey, we didn't like that," and then I just say, "Okay, good to know. You know, that was the star take. That was the take that the director liked. So I'm going to use another one that I agree with you. I think another one's better." You know what I mean? And so it's helped smooth things over at times too, because when they hear that, they're like, oh, I didn't realize, you know, that was, you know what I mean? But believe me, I would love to just use whichever one.
So that's so interesting. So it is really interesting because we have different philosophies on both that. Because I definitely will choose within, you know, reason, of course, if they've made it very, again, with the big swings, if it's very clear they want to go in this one direction, I'll usually go in that direction. But I will often use a take one unstarred. Because also my philosophy is it's not necessarily because the performance is bad. They might not have liked it to go to the studio because the lighting was slightly off, or there was a camera bump way later in the take. That doesn't mean the line earlier was not the best one. You know, there's a lot of reasons why those stars and circles exist.
No, totally. But a lot of times, as you know, in the dailies, you can hear the direction. You know what I mean? They're like, so they're going a certain place. They get there. Here it is. You know what I mean? Are you happy with where you're going on set? Like, do you want to take them somewhere else? You know what I mean? And showing that, because a lot of times the early takes will be a little more what the actor had in mind. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that can be great. But, you know, but this is where like you start massaging everything down the line. You know what I mean? But it's just interesting to see like how you navigate these things, because this is where the politics does come into play. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
but I agree with you on sound and music. It has to be completely polished. You know, you have to have all the sound effects and the clean sound and fully temp scored and all of that stuff.
I just think politically it just covers you. You know what I mean? Because producers,
it's hard to watch without. It's hard to watch without. No, you can't. People are too used to watching it with.
These folks, studio execs, producers, they don't know how to watch a cut without that. You know what I mean? They're not expecting to imagine that. But if you work with like the Coen brothers, you know, they're going to work with no music. You know what I mean? Because it helps them focus on the story that they're telling with the shots that they need. You know what I mean? They're doing it.
I like that. We actually sent our cuts on Beef with no music sometimes as well, with first cuts, one with music, one without. And I think I actually cut without music. I lay in the music much later. I think it's really important to make sure your scene is working dry emotionally, because music can cover so much.
Yeah, it can fill.
You have to make sure it works on its own, and then that music elevates and supports what is already there. Now, of course, you have something that's not working. You have to, you know, we use all the tricks if we need to later on to make things work, but you should try to make it work dry.
Yeah,
and then add the
music.
Something
to that, but I send that first cut fully loaded, assembly,
yes, 100%.
Fully loaded,
yes,
because there are producers watching it and they don't know. You know, maybe they do, but certainly some of them are not expecting that. You know, they'll be like, "What did you work this week? Like, where's all the music? You know,
where's everything?" Yeah.
So but behind the scenes, like, it's a super helpful thing to do when you're working on a scene, and it's like, all right, let's strip it down and see where the problem really is, you know what I mean, and what's working, and then put it back in. But I guess I'm also curious, like, do you have any broad sort of philosophical kind of beliefs on music in the movies, and like when it adds, when it's just covering up mistakes, or I don't know, you know what I mean? I'm just kind of.
Yeah, I think it always depends on the tone of the exact piece and everything. I think there's always that fun thing of actually having no music can be more impactful. And I always try to remember that. Or when someone has the idea of like, let's strip out the music, I definitely want to try it. Even if I love the song or I love the score, it's like, well, let's see. Because sometimes, that silence can make a scene feel really real and therefore resonate differently than when you have, that movie score under it that kind of either can make things more emotional, but also can take that edge off that we know we're watching a movie, which sometimes you want. But when you hear a certain scene silent, it can feel really real and really impactful. So I like to play with that too. It's like, oh, well, let's actually try getting rid of that music now that we're at this point in the cut, and let's see, where can we lose it? I also think if you have too much music, people stop listening to it and it stops being effective. It just turns into a bed that's kind of in the background. So you have to really be careful with that and make sure you're using it wisely.
There was a Polanski thing that I did on one short film where he was like, if you're using score, don't use sound effects. And if you're using sound effects, don't use score. So it just forces these really like distinct decisions. Now you're going to end up with like, I don't want to say flatter movie, but in terms of the shaping techniques, like layering on music, it's getting bigger and more sound effects. And you know what I mean? You can kind of build a rise and fall out of that. So you're not going to have that, but it does lead to something that's like very interesting. You know what I mean? That was, and that, I don't think anybody does that anymore.
That's very interesting. I hadn't heard
that.
Not
as a consistent like director thing throughout their filmography. I don't know how long he carried on with that, but it was definitely a thing for a while. I remember reading one of his interviews where he was like talking about this. He was working with Bob Evans, I think, on maybe Chinatown. I don't remember, but they were having a conversation. It was a lot of fun. But then voiceover. Like, I know people are very opinionated about like how to use voiceover, if it should be used, and all this. Do you have any insights into voiceover?
It's funny. I was cleaning out my, I don't know, garage last year, and I found one of my shorts on a VHS tape, and I actually had this. I have a vintage TV, and I popped it in, and it was voiceover. And I was like, oh man, I love this. This is great. But it was like very much the tone was all set around this inner monologue, and that was like the whole thing. And so I think I like voiceover when it's written well, when there is actual thought behind it. I do not like adding voiceover as like a fix per se. I think you really want to create the piece with that in mind. That's when it really shines, when it was the concept was there to have it, because that means it's been really planned out and thought about, and it can be really magical. Because it's like reading, it's like you get to be inside the characters' heads, and like that's kind of what you get then with the voiceover, which is really fun, and this kind of like more like a novel, which I love. So, but when you just do it to try to like fix something, generally, in my experience, haven't worked. I'm sure there's something out there where they did it and it was brilliant. So there's always the opportunity for that. But yeah, I mean, I really like it. I've haven't had a lot of experience working with it myself.
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think of a lot of my favorite movies just happen to have voiceover, you know what I mean? But in the screenwriting world, it's like very looked down upon as like, the easy way to get through the medium or what have you.
That's so interesting, because I would think it'd be very hard to write well, actually.
To write a strong
voiceover very well. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think of like Taxi Driver and Eastbound and Down, and Eastbound and Down, it was the tape. His book on tape would function as the voiceover. You know what I mean?
It's like clever. It's like it's like when you really like build it into a concept, into
with Taxi Driver, it was the diary, then it was, Apocalypse Now, Kids had a tiny bit of voiceover, but I just remember that voiceover so vividly, So anyway, I don't know. People have opinions on using it, but I agree. Like if you're in a pinch and you're using it as like a blatant patch or something, it can seem a little less than the best. But there's so many like what's his name? Wow, I'm blanking. Adam Sandler movies that have like voiceover, like literally just at the opening of the movie. You know what I mean? Like you're reading a book. It's like Bill was in New York City after his divorce, and like just like Once Upon a Time type voiceovers just to like kick off the movie. You know what I mean? And in America, like as a cinema person, you're kind of like, yeah, it's not the best technique, but somehow it like sets up his movie so well because it's not like a highbrow piece of cinema. You know what I mean? Like he's setting the stage like really well to do exactly what he does. And it's so broad. Like it's like my wife is from Brazil. Like she can sit down and watch any Adam Sandler movie. So can I, but it's not every movie that all over the world, like someone can just like sit down and follow like 100%. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's, I think it's like all filmmaking and all movies, whether it's like the popcorn movie or, cinema, to me, filmmaking is all about connecting people. And that's what storytelling has done for all of humanity. I mean, look at the Odyssey. It's like a poem for how many years that's, it's like, and now is an incredibly successful film. And it's like storytelling is what we
Come here,
kind
Vince.
of like.
Sorry, my son just.
Oh, yes.
Up. Come here, Vince. Come meet Lauren. No?
No, hi.
I just woke up, so we're gonna have to probably cut this off in a second. But I hear what you're saying.
We should. I have to get back to work, so
like
cut that though. Don't let them know that I'm. Don't let them know that I'm.
Gotta cut that out. Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
A
lot of fun. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And so, are you in New York?
I'm actually in Orlando right now.
Oh, nice.
I moved during COVID, and New York was very, very shut down.
Yeah, it's scary.
And everything was kind of going remote. Now I'm kind of like thinking of moving back. I went to LA for like 5 months. Open the door. One second. I know you got to get back. He's just headed onto the porch here. But it's anyway, I'm here. That's kind of why I got into animating, because in New York I used to make little things with a lot of actor friends and all this. And down here it's like you are definitely not in which is fine. I did everything's remote, like it was all like screen share, and did some cool movies. And then I'd fly to like directors' houses, you know what I mean, to do like 3-4 weeks at the end or this or that. But it definitely got me into animating, which is
cool.
Yeah, that's been great. Cool. Anyway, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was good to
get to know you. I know I've been trying to be more active on social media, and you know what? I found it really fun. Yeah. You actually can meet people, and like it's nice. As editors, we don't get out enough, so it's good.
It used to be like grab a coffee. Now it's like, why? Let's just grab a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Hello. Aren't you cute?
All right.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck with Beef and other projects.
Thank you so much.
I'll be in touch.
All right. Bye.
All right. Later.